Thank you very much. Wow, tough slot. It's been a long day, hasn't it? I'm so pleased I didn't have to follow Tom Stoppard, though. Thank you, Sir Tom, for all of those wide words about how humanity needs to embrace altruism in order to survive as a species. But here's Charlie to talk about how to improve your lower thirds. That's my hashtag. I'm on 499 followers, so if you want to win that golden whatever it is, then, sign up. I'm going to start with a bit of a quiz, though. There's something that links me with these three people. In case you don't know who they are, that's world-renowned writer and philosopher Malcolm Gladwell, author of The Tipping Point. It's wonderful actress, star of Universal Channel's The Good Wife, Juliana Margulies, and international pop star Ed Sheeran. Well, anybody? No, you probably won't know, but actually what links me with those three people is that none of us had a television when we were growing up. You are allowed to go, at this point, yeah. Why is that relevant? I think it leads me into two different, possibly unique positions. One is that I now love TV with a passion and devotion that my parents hadn't anticipated when they made that decision. And secondly, that I'm very well placed to imagine a world in which TV as we know it doesn't exist. Now, there is a tremendous danger in being the person who stands up on conference platforms and tells you that the way your business is going to be revolutionized over the next few years. The end is at hand. And that's not my job. That's Lee Hunt's job, and he does it brilliantly every year. But in my defense, I've never done it before. I didn't stand here when the satellite and cable revolution happened and say that the days of big shared experiences are over, because they're not. I didn't stand here when TiVo was launched and say that the days of advertising breaks are dead and gone, because they're not. I didn't stand here when iPlayer and On Demand took off and say that, the days of watching live TV as a shared experience have gone, because they haven't. But something has happened that makes me think the next revolution will be the biggest, certainly ever since I started coming to Promax, which is eternity. But I am aware of the danger of predictions because, as I'm sure most of you know by now, 2015 was the year that Back to the Future said, we're going to go forward to. And if you remember that film well, they got some predictions right and some predictions wrong. So I'm hoping for slightly less of the food rehydrator predictions and slightly more of the Google glasses. You'll notice they predicted Google glasses on the right. But this speech isn't so much a prediction of dire change, I think, as hopefully a wake-up call to both sides of the marketing agency divide that we've got to change what we're doing in a pretty profound way. And the reason I think that is because I see it happening in front of my own eyes. Even me, the skeptical devotee of linear TV broadcasting, goes home at the end of the day to find my two kids on a sofa bed. And when I ask them what they're doing, they say they're watching television. Yes, unlike my parents, I do let my kids watch television. I figured that would be just too hypocritical. But there they are, earnestly not watching all of the thousands of output that your good selves are putting out. If you want to know exactly what they were watching at that moment, Jem, on the right-hand side there, channeling Yoda, he was watching Video Game High School, which is an utterly brilliant, it's about 5 series long, it's a children's drama with really good production values, and it's released exclusively on YouTube by Rocket Jump Studios. You should check it out, particularly if you've got kids around 10. Kit, on the left-hand side, he was watching this. It's a series of videos, also on YouTube, hosted by a vlogger called Ali A, about his unlikely friendship with a robot called Frank. They're really funny, they're incredibly engagingly made, they're scheduled and released just like traditional programming every week, and they're entirely paid for by the makers of a pretty unhealthy meat-based snack company called Matheson's Fridge Raiders. So there you have it, a production company piping stuff to them over the top, as people are liking to say now, and a fast food brand partnering with a YouTube vlogger, all bypassing our conventional TV channels. And my boys think they're watching television. Now, just in case you want proof beyond my two 10 and 12-year-old boys, that's reasonable. One fact that of the many brilliant stats Lee gave you earlier he didn't use was that manufacturers have stated that as of 2017, every single TV produced will be an internet-connected smart TV. Samsung is switching all of its sets to Tizen, a Linux-based operating system. Sony, Philips, and Sharp have all gone with Android, and Panasonic is releasing its first Firefox-based TV this year in spring. But you kind of know that's coming, don't you? And you probably think we're pretty sorted because we've got an on-demand video player and we stream our channel live and we've got a pretty good website. Well, you might be strategically okay. You might be strategically okay. But what I want to think about and talk about this afternoon is whether or not your brand still looks like an analog 4x3 brand with a bit of digital add-on. Because I think if that's the case, we are hastening our march towards irrelevancy. Let's look at what television itself is going to look like. Let's start with the simplification of the status quo, what it looks like now. It's all pretty familiar, isn't it? Neatly designed for 4:3 safe, even though only 12 people in Europe are still watching televisions that size, and most of them have been turned into fish tanks. You know, the type is all sized for standard definition televisions, and it's positioned squarely in the middle, and from logo design to font size to screen grids to movements, they're all from a template that were designed before mobility. To be provocative, let's look at what a pretty standard TV branding project deliverables list looks like right now. So it's got idents, endboards, menus, IPPs, bugs and dogs, lower thirds, pop-ups and violators, end credit squeezes. It's familiar, it's comfortable. We all collectively slip into it like an old jumper. So here, by way of a structure for the presentation, are a bunch of things that could be forming your next deliverables list. Now, this list is not a bunch of random futuristic jargon. This is actually what we're working on live right now with at least 2 clients for projects that are about moving them from being linear only to digital first as a proposition, where their content's going to be delivered in a completely new way. So, here's a list that it could be tomorrow's deliverables. Naming protocols, responsive logos, signature movements, slippy design, interface fonts, content throw templates, carousel paradigms, and brand iconography. Now, does everybody know what all 8 of those are? Okay, because what I'm hoping is that at the very least this afternoon, you'll have some new jargon to take back to your bosses, blind them with science, and say you need more money. Okay. Before I do that, I just want to park one thing, because it's a bit of a blocker. The problem with playout. I want to lay down a challenge to the providers of the graphic systems for all of our channels. That's you, Viz, Pixel Power, or Ad. We need you to invest in innovation. And progress is not just the ability to put ever more complex weather and sports tickers onto a multi-screen news broadcast. It's about talking to designers about what a channel needs to survive now and in 2020. But let's just park that and go round it, or assume we'll find a way around it. In fact, I'm confident we'll find a way around it, because finding a way around things is what consumers do if designers don't get it right. The single driver of everything I'm going to talk about is the need to design channels with an eye to crossing multiple screens for maximum mobility. Many of the lessons that I've learned have come from us at Redbee having a user experience team, or UX team, and a user interface team, or UI team, sitting alongside our broadcast design team. And they've kind of taught me a whole new language, which we now try and take as entry level for our projects. And one of the best things about UI and UX is that unlike most broadcast branding theory, it's based on science. It's based on eye mapping to see how people behave, or heat mapping to see how people interact. It's based on dwell times and response rates. And I think those are the things that we need to start looking at in our future channel branding. It all feeds into a more scientific approach to design. Persuasive design patterns based on cognitive biases, recognition over recall, tunneling. Enough for a separate seminar, you'll be delighted to hear. But where do we begin with our new 2020 channel brief? Well, old school. We're going to start with the name and the logo. But before we get to the logo, a word on naming. And I was really struck by this from Lee's excellent talk this morning. What is the name of the channel in this new world? Now, traditionally, channels are branded as sub-brands of their master brand. And that's kind of for good positioning reasons, because we want to position those individual sub-brands. But in this, the connected TV app world, I think it's much more interesting. If you look at the people out there now already that in the connected TV world, they've kind of all fallen into this system of naming the delivery system for their players. So you have Sky Go or HBO Go or Stars Play or NFL Now or CBBC Go, which we help create. But think of my kids. They just expect to be able to watch HBO or CBBC or Sky. Why are we creating brands that aren't the master brand to do that? If anything, it just kind of makes us feel out of step with their expectation. Are we creating those brands because it's just kind of what marketing people do? Now, after you've got your name, the logo, many of you may be aware of the principles of responsive design. For those that aren't, a kind of distilled dictionary definition would be that responsive design will fluidly change and respond to fit any screen or device size. And it's distinct, importantly, from adaptive web design, which will only adapt to fit a predetermined set of screen sizes. So for me, responsive is always the holy grail, because it will work anywhere. Now, I suspect what many of you don't have, though, is a logo that has been designed with responsiveness to screen size at its heart. There's a wonderful and experimental website created by designer Joe Harrison that demonstrates how logo design can absolutely flex to match space in a really fluid and responsive way, from cinema screen to iPhone app. I've done some screen grabs, so this is me clicking and dragging that I've just captured to demonstrate how this works. So you can start to see the pattern here. And what I love about it is even a really complex logo like Disney's can operate on a scaled and responsive basis. And that kind of shapes and marks start to take on huge importance in how we design and think about logos going forward. Look at the equity in that red star for Heineken in this world when we need to scale up and down. Now, I'd like to move from logos to on-screen behaviors as a general rule, and I'm going to try and avoid words like on-screen presentation. Instead, what I want to suggest is that you should be thinking about how your brand moves on screen. What is its signature movement? As more and more of your audience get used to interacting with your brand, how your brand moves, how it interacts, becomes critical. To start with a bit of inspiration, where do you get inspiration for new movements? Well, I always look for some of the best iPad design, because I think it's a fascinating, and this is actually probably a couple of years old now, but it's a brilliant iPad magazine called Kotachi, which was built on their own developed origami engine platform. And you can see just a snapshot of some of the movement that they've created in here. I met the guys in Norway who created it, and they're absolute craftsmen, but it seems to take them about a year to put together every issue, so I think they may be terrible businessmen. But they have sold the technology on, and this is another magazine called Stipler which uses it. But don't just take it from me that movement's important. I don't know if any of you have read Google's new design manifesto, which is based around material design. And they say, motion provides meaning. Now, with channel branding, we're all about providing meaning, aren't we? So I think it's really important that we make it a key element of our toolboxes. So you've got your inspiration, then you need to try and put it in practice with an individual brand's personality. Here's a bit of work that Red Bee did for a children's online video player. And again, this is a screen capture of interacting with it. And hopefully you can start to see how the interface works and how for a small child it might feel more fun and responsive than a traditional video carousel player. An element of thought and surprise, and obviously the next step is then to take it from an online environment and to take it into your traditional TV branding. But it doesn't have to be that complicated either. It could just be about developing navigation systems that become as instinctive to viewers in the online world as it is when they go into the linear world. For a player we're developing for Ericsson, the user experience for, this is all about a really simple vertical movement through categories and a horizontal movement through titles. I'll play you a tiny bit of this. So I think it becomes interesting when you then take those principles and it's seamless if you're watching on TV or interacting. That is what I suspect my kids will demand. But let's look at one recent channel rebrand that I thought absolutely nailed this. I think it actually does nearly all of the things I'm going to be talking about today. It's from agency Plenty for Canal Plus in Spain. Could I also say, absolute shame on anyone who was on the design jury at Promax. Really shame on you, because I thought this was by far the most future-facing piece of channel branding work done this year, and it's not even nominated. So I'm just going to have a little shake of my head there. You can enjoy it here. Okay, we all make our case studies too long, don't we? It's fine. Whilst praising them to the skies. When I went to their website, again, there were kind of elements of the rebrand there. But to me, one of the most joyous things about it was the sort of tactileness and the responsiveness of the plus sign. And I couldn't find that on the website. And I think in the future, we've really got to get those things joined up. Now, whilst I expect lots of you have heard of responsive design, I'm guessing not many of you will have heard of slippy design. It's got a very similar principle. Again, it's all about putting the audience's needs first, which we obviously always try and do. But where it differs from traditional TV thinking is this. Normally, all of our design communication is about trying to keep people watching. It's based on the premise that slippy design is based on the premise that people probably don't want to look for very, very long. It was coined by a US designer called Jake Zukowski, who's the creative director of an agency, Frog, in Seattle. And he was designing for something you definitely don't want to spend a lot of time looking at, a screen mounted on the dashboard of your car. So imagine you're driving along at 90 kilometers an hour. How much time do you need to read this? So he proposed an alternative. He said, well, everything we do at the moment is sticky design. It's about, and this kind of rang true to me about what we do for TV, it's about keeping people longer, it's about building communities, it's about extra material, it's about linking to things, to other channels. Whereas slippy design is all about quick, it's all about being scannable and informative. Created for the glance was a phrase that really struck me when I thought again of how my kids watch TV. Streamlined processes exposing primary functionality. In our world, I think it's about recognizing some of those realities of speeding through junctions at times 30 on your remote control, and also how people increasingly use EPGs for program information. So I guess my question is, should we start to think about the way we do end boards, for example? Here's a pretty random selection of end boards. I haven't picked these out by way of critique. In fact, we designed 3 of them, so these all must be brilliant. But they all got me thinking variously. Do we still think this is the way people find the satellite and cable numbers of the channels? Do we really think that tiny hashtags and URLs will get picked up on promo end boards? Do we really need to tell people that it's also available in HD on the end of a promo end board? I mean, a question to the room, should we even be trying to tell people what day and time a show is on a week out? I think a principal need for the viewer might be to find out that the show's about to end on the video on demand platform. Do you know what slippy design would do? Slippy design would just go, land the title. That's it. Just land the title. People will find it. And when they go back to their Twitter feed, they might just remember it. If we look again at the world of online program making, which is something that I spend a lot of time doing, there aren't any kind of accepted norms of behavior that we all recognize. Here's a trailer for one of my favorite new online comedies, which again is just, this is stuff for you to take away. Go and watch this, it's brilliant. And see if you can spot the title.
There's a gate that surrounds the entire cemetery. Now that gate's not to keep people out. It's to keep the dead in.
All you have to do is just keep safe and make sure they're having fun. You're like a camp counselor. Please, I've been stuck here for 20 years.
So I'm just gonna need you two back to the graveyard and everything's okay.
Just so long as no one else slipped through the gate to be left unattended, huh?
Yep. Gary saves the graveyard. All you need to know, because you'll stick it in the search term and you'll find all the episodes. While we're talking about end boards, how many promo makers or designers here have been told that you need to have the type on screen for the time that it takes you to read it all out loud twice? Or that other great accepted wisdom that you need 3 to 4 seconds per line of information. I mean, really? Have you seen the latest Honda ad? Brilliant, isn't it? Imagine if they had every word up there for the time it took to read it out loud twice. While we're talking about information graphics, isn't it time we also started to recognize that the era of the 4K TV screen is here, that people aren't peering at some blurry box in the corner of their room? The designers for gaming have kind of recognized this for years. Look at the beautiful use of font in these screen grabs from last year's smash hit Destiny. It's sparse, it's elegant, it uses every inch of the screen. And similarly, I think the first person who really struck out, and I noticed was doing this, was Pharrell Williams in the video for 24 Hour Happy, where again, there was just a really beautiful, sparse lightness of touch of the user interface. And then only 2 weeks ago, lovely Promaxbda, sent around this brilliant rebrand from the creative services team at ProSieben. And I thought, yes, this is the start of people really exploring the possibilities of type in the new world. Once again, I could have included this piece in the navigations section too, as I think the interface seems intrinsically in tune with tablet movement. So for those of you who didn't see it in the session this morning, let's have a look at that. As I say, all the case studies are too long, aren't they? I promise we're going to try and get ours in 30 seconds in the future. Following hot on the heels of trailer end boards, the new deliverables I think you should all be considering on your next make list is the content throw template. I've invented this phrase, trademark. In a YouTube or Vimeo environment that increasingly your content will be seen, the content throw is king. Now, the smartest digital-first channels already know that the click to subscribe and choose next episode message require far more effort than your traditional end credit squeezes. They kind of need to be bespoke and they need to be compelling. There are tons of examples of people asking for a direct action in a really unengaging way out there. So I'll show you a couple that are doing it well. Here is an example from Comedy Central's web series, Idiot Sitter. I'll play you the end of the first episode. Now, this is a show about a billionaire who hires a college graduate to look after his totally moronic 19-year-old daughter.
I'll take it.
Good.
I threw those.
I know.
It's eating from earlier on the couch.
I know.
We're gonna be friends.
I know.
Wow, our first episode. And now we're
episode's available now. Now? Now. Wow. Also, we wrote it. We did? Yeah. Wow. Look here. Here's what it is.
Here's another bespoke design for College Humour and their series Adam Ruins Everything.
Everyone still gets their food on time. The only difference is their waiters get a steady income and no one has to argue about the bill.
And don't tip on the tax.
What? You always tip on the tax.
I never tip on the tax. Ever since I was a kid, I never tipped on the goddamn tax.
Join me next time on Adam Ruins Everything when I'll be talking about Bill Cosby's dozens of rape accusations.
You're a monster.
Hey guys, I'm Adam Conover from College Humor. Click here to subscribe or here to watch another video. I swear it's not going to be a video of Benedict Cumberbatch and Patrick Stewart doing oil wrestling. It might be, but it's not. So just click on it and you can find out what it is. It's not going to be that, but you'll know.
So I think an easy leap is to think about how your content ends on your own on-demand platforms, on your equivalents of the BBC iPlayer. Is it as impactful as that? And then perhaps the next step on from that is to think, okay, maybe there's also rich learning in how our end credit squeezes work. Content throws that genuinely make you want to continue the relationship. If you want a final bit of proof that matters, here is how one brand that everyone thinks has completely nailed YouTube, Vice magazine, have completely failed to use design to sort out their content throw. Yeah, I've managed to offend both the people who made the program and not be able to read where to click to subscribe. An adjacent piece of design thinking that I would urge you to consider as part of your next rebrand, as future deliverables, is how you handle multiple pieces of content. Again, this is born out of UX thinking, but if your channel doesn't have a VOD platform or an OTT presence, within 5 years, trust me, they will have. And at that point, you have to start considering new things like what your video carousel will look like. Because at the moment, most people have settled around a pretty boring, safe video carousel like this. And they're fine, they're simple, but they're utterly without brand presence. And then there are brands that are starting to do something a bit more interesting, stuff like HBO Go, which was recently praised in Wired magazine with these words: "It has a drift to it. This is a little cognitive hack that is trying to get you to do something or look at something in a way that's not the way you'd naturally engage with it." And it's very subtle when you get to interface with it, but that word, a little drift, is what HBO are trying to achieve. But then you consider this piece of work for the Smithsonian Channel. It's still a way of ordering, of putting forward videos for you to peruse, to click to watch. But it's done so with an aesthetic that makes you want to play, that makes you want to explore, that is totally in tune with a brand. Let's see how it works.
Smithsonian Channel is the place for exciting, authentic, Emmy Award-winning programming. Now we're bringing the channel to you in a whole new way with our innovative iPad app. It's a place to discover, create, and immerse yourself in an exciting new Smithsonian Channel digital experience. Selected as the Apple iTunes app of the week, this is the first app that offers you the freedom to create and control your very own video channel through the innovative platform we call StorySpace. Here, viewers will find a variety of topics and build a playlist library from over 1,000 videos. Simply move the topics that interest you into the circle. The content is presented in a galaxy of orbiting rings, allowing you to explore the rich storytelling found in the channel's programming. Find videos that appeal to you and drag your selections into the center rings. Press play and let your adventure begin. The elegant video player allows you to easily watch the
It's a video carousel. They've just put as much design effort into it as the rest of the brand. Now, my penultimate recommendation would be that I think alongside your standard deliverables list, you should be thinking about bespoke icons or iconography. This isn't just because all kids today communicate with emoticons and stickers instead of words, though that in itself is a pretty good reason. but I think it's just an opportunity to design, to define your brand through design. I think one of the best examples of this recently was the work done in the UK for the Guardian newspaper as part of a complete redesign of all of the Guardian's digital channels. The agency Territory were approached to completely design and craft a consolidated system of icons. And it's based on a new font, Guardian Egyptian, that was created for the newspaper that runs from the printed edition right through to all the digital channels. And they created around 75 icons with real care to make sure that they have the same level of fidelity when used at a really small space. And they created this defined grid system, 4 pixels wide, as the base for all the icons. And that ensures legibility, consistency. But they sort of developed it in such a way, using these interlocking circles, that it also began to speak in the same way, I think, as they were defining a font for The Guardian. And you end up with this really beautiful, instantly identifiable type of language for The Guardian. Similarly, the social TV site Get Glue have designed themselves a bespoke icon sequence, aware that I think in a social world, it might actually be the piece of brand communication of yours that gets seen the most. One of the bits of design that I'm proudest of in Red Bee's 10 years was the Doctor Who logo in the shape of a TARDIS, the Doctor's flying time travel box, for those of you who don't know the show. And the reason I'm so proud of it is not just because it was brilliantly designed by a couple of creatives to be doodled on children's exercise books, but because it was conceived with portability in mind. You know, it works as a T-shirt, it works as a badge, it works as the back of playing cards, as the spine of a book. And, you know, most crucially of all, it works as an app. Remember those lovely responsive designed logos that I played to you at the beginning? Well, I think for me, this is that thinking in action, from cinema screen, 3D event to app, responsive design. So design your iconography with portability in mind. Another great example of a BBC Worldwide brand that does this is Top Gear, with their own walking icon, the Stig. He's not the Top Gear logo, but he is portable and adaptable, as the BBC Worldwide team brilliantly showed when they took him to Poland on the back of a lorry. He is actually really portable. I mean, who else would you make the header of your YouTube channel? Think about the portability of your iconography. Okay, that's the kind of practical future deliverables bit done, but I also just want to touch on one of the non-practical things that you could be thinking about, which is a bit more about how your channel looks and feels. I think one of the key things that audiences expect in the new world, whether it's my kids or whether it's me, frankly, or whether it's people who only exist in the worlds of stock photography. What a heartbreaking existence that must be. Audiences expect a degree of interaction and, crucially, if not actual interaction with them, the sense that your channel is alive, that it has a pulse, that it wakes up in the morning on the same day that you do, to the same weather that you have. Because that's how those YouTube channels and those gaming platforms and those social media streams feel like. I mean, that doesn't mean you have to have live continuity and on-screen Twitter debates, though, you know, those are both good and valid. It does mean, I think, you should just be constantly looking for a way to not feel like you are just a video jukebox pre-programmed by someone who bought a load of programs at MIPCOM and stuck them on a server. Because right now, there are too many brands out there that kind of feel like that. But don't worry, there are lots of ways of feeling alive, from the very ambitious, and this is probably my favorite bit of innovative channel brand thinking, and it came probably 18 months or so ago, I guess now, from the Afrikaans music channel MK in South Africa. So apologies if you've seen this before. As I say, it's 18 months or so old, but I think it deserves every platform I can talk about it on. we gave it and its creators, Ogilvy and Mather, Johannesburg, a gold D&AD pencil for it. Just to explain the project, MK filmed idents that played out in real time over 20 days, and you would see the point of view of one character's life playing out. But what made it even cooler was that you could interact with the character whose point of view you just seen in the idents on every social network, chatting with them on Twitter about what you just seen them get up to in the ident. This case study will give you a bit of a flavor of it. Now, clearly MKIs was a really labor-intensive way of showing aliveness. But the need to constantly refresh and be alive is driving a lot of brand strategies at the moment. I've recently heard people from both Beats and Facebook referring to needing to have creative at the speed of culture. But you don't have to go to the extraordinary levels that MKIs do. You can do it in a really, really cheap and fun way. For BBC One at the moment, we're actually using flash animation to constantly refresh the logo, so that if it's the day the nation are all taking their Christmas trees outside, it looks like this. Or last Friday, the day of the solar eclipse, it looked like this. Or next week, when the clocks go forward, it'll look like this. Or the day it snowed. Yes, it is just one day in Britain. Look like this. Really cheap flash animation, but with an ambition of 365 days of feeling current. Or there's an even simpler way of the constant refresh. You design your identity like our latest rebrand for Radio 1, where you can literally put it in the hands of the consumer wherever they are and be constantly updating it. Whichever way you do it, think about how to feel alive and how to keep the audience involved. Okay, so in summary, let's return to that hopefully useful and semi-provocative future deliverables list. Naming protocols, responsive logos, signature movements, slippy design, interface fonts, content throw templates, carousel paradigms, brand iconography. I really hope that at least some of those creep into your next deliverables list and will help inspire your next channel Rebrand's thinking, whoever that may be with. If you want to find out what other TV my kids are watching or anything else interesting, then I'm at Charlie Mawer. Thank you very much. Enjoy your drink, and hope to see you later.